Do you complain about mosquitoes in the summer? Now, imagine facing them without repellent, without mosquito nets, and living next to a pond full of happy larvae. In the Middle Ages, peasants didn't have miracle sprays, but they did have a lot of ingenuity and quite a bit of body odor to fend off those winged nuisances with bad intentions. In this video, we're going to see how medieval peasants managed to survive mosquito bites, using everything from smoke-filled houses to diets loaded with garlic and onions to keep bugs at bay through their sweat. I'll tell you how they used plants like lavender and wormwood, and how wearing long clothes in the summer wasn't fashion, it was strategy. They even knew when to stay indoors to avoid becoming a moving buffet. All of this without knowing a thing about biology, but with a whole lot of street smarts and smoke. So, if mosquitoes are driving you crazy, maybe you can learn something from the Middle Ages. Hit like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments. Would you try any of these medieval tricks, or are you sticking with your citronella spray? Alright then, without further delay, let's begin. Today I'm bringing you a topic that probably wasn't on your list of medieval concerns. Mosquitoes. Yes, you heard that right. Peasants in the Middle Ages didn't just have to worry about feudal lords and the harvest. They also had to deal with those tiny flying vampires that suck our blood. Picture this: medieval Europe, green fields, a sunny day, and a swarm of mosquitoes ready to wreak havoc. It was like having a bite fest in your own home, but without the music or snacks. In fact, it's estimated that mosquito density in some areas was so high, you'd think they were hosting a convention, and the peasants weren't the only ones invited. The bites could also bring diseases, making peasant life even harder. Fun, right? So, while today we think of them as just a modern nuisance, in the Middle Ages, these insects were a well-known and documented problem. Imagine having to watch over your crops while also making sure you didn't get bitten. It was a real survival game. Before diving into how they coped, it's important to understand what mosquitoes meant in their daily lives. So, how did they survive these pesky bugs? Let's find out. Did you know that smelling bad was actually kind of a blessing? That's right. In the Middle Ages, personal hygiene wasn't exactly a top priority. Imagine a world where soap was a luxury and showers were more legend than reality. Peasants, thanks to hard work and lack of cleanliness, developed a, let's say, very distinct aroma. But here's the interesting part. That body odor, that sweat that might make many people plug their noses, worked as a natural mosquito repellent. Who would have thought? While we today spray ourselves with repellent like it's designer perfume, they just let their bodies do the dirty work, literally. Mosquitoes are especially good at detecting smells and are often drawn to certain scents, like the sweetness of clean skin. But sweat, with all its natural compounds, was absolutely repulsive to them. So, in an ironic twist of fate, bad hygiene turned into a defensive strategy. So, next time you get bombarded with mosquito repellent ads, think of those medieval peasants. While you're spraying yourself with lotions and potions, they just had to be themselves, with a dash of sweat. And if you think that's weird, wait until you hear about their diet. That had its own little surprise. Let's get into it. If you thought garlic was only good for warding off vampires, think again. Turns out, in the Middle Ages, peasants didn't just toss it into their soups. It was part of their master plan to keep mosquitoes at bay. Yep, you heard right. Garlic and onions on the menu. And not just for flavor. These brave folks loaded up their diets with garlic and onion. And this wasn't just for a gourmet touch. Both foods are rich in sulfur, a compound that, when metabolized, makes your body emit an odor mosquitoes absolutely can't stand. Imagine you're a mosquito flying up to someone who smells like garlic. It's like someone just told you there's a cleaning supply buffet across the street. You turn around and buzz off. Even today we use garlic and onion, not just in the kitchen, but for their health benefits. So next time you cook a meal, remember, you're not just feeding your stomach, you're building an anti-mosquito force field. Eat it with pride. And speaking of eating healthy, let's be honest, the medieval diet wasn't exactly Instagram-worthy. It was more of a survival menu, garlic, onion, and whatever the fields had to offer. No green smoothies, no quinoa. They knew the important thing was keeping the bugs away. So now you know, if you find yourself in a mosquito battle, think like a peasant. Garlic and onion, your best allies. Now, let's move on to how fire helped keep mosquitoes at bay. Don't miss this. Who needs a fireplace when you can live in a cloud of smoke? In medieval life, fire wasn't just for warmth or cooking. It was basically mosquito insurance. That's right. The smoke from bonfires and embers was the best natural repellent humanity had back then. Picture it. You're in your house, the fire crackling, and suddenly a mosquito army decides it's party time. But surprise, the smoke kicks in. Mosquitoes, those guests who never know when to leave, do a U-turn and fly away. So, while you're enjoying a warm dinner, they're forced to go elsewhere. Even today, we still use fire to drive away bugs. Who hasn't lit a fire pit in the yard and noticed the bugs steer clear? It's like the flames have a sign that says, "No mosquitoes allowed." Ironically, instead of a smoke-free home, they ended up living in a kind of open-air sauna, but hey, at least they were safe from those tiny flying vampires. So, yeah, fire was a powerful ally in the mosquito wars. But don't go just yet, because in the next section, we'll talk about another key factor in this fight: water. Don't miss it. Did you know medieval peasants were well aware that still water was a mosquito magnet? That's right, those tiny flying vampires have a soft spot for ponds and puddles. When water just sits there, it's like an all-you-can-eat buffet. Mosquitoes lay their eggs in still water. Each female can lay about 100 eggs at once. Imagine that. In no time, you've got a full-blown infestation. That's why peasants took this seriously. One of the most common solutions was to dig trenches. These helped drain the water and keep it moving. Goodbye stagnant puddles. They also covered containers where water was stored. That way, they kept those unwanted guests from settling inside the house. It's like when you cover your food so the dog doesn't come steal it. Today, we're still facing the same issue. Water management is key, whether you're in the countryside or the city. Keeping water moving and clean is crucial to stop mosquitoes from reproducing. So, the next time you see a puddle, think about what might be going on beneath the surface. And speaking of curious facts, did you know mosquitoes can live up to a month? And only the females bite. They need the protein from blood to develop their eggs. So if you get bitten, now you know who's to blame. We've already seen how fire offered protection, but water was a constant enemy. Now let's talk about how plants also played a big role in mosquito defense. Don't miss this. Forget modern repellents. Peasants had their own plant pharmacy. In their gardens, they grew herbs like lavender and mint that not only smelled amazing, but also kept mosquitoes away. Imagine having a mini spa at home and, at the same time, scaring off those flying pests. All in one. Lavender, for example, has properties that mosquitoes can't stand. It's like they're saying, "No thanks, I'd rather hang out somewhere stinkier." And mint? Besides being refreshing in tea, it's another natural repellent. So next time you're making a mojito, think about it. You're really crafting an anti-mosquito shield. Nowadays, many of us turn to essential oils and natural products. But honestly, those peasants were way ahead of us. They didn't need natural or organic labels. Everything they used came straight from the earth. It was like having a health store right in the backyard. So, there you have it. Nature gave them the tools to fight off those annoying little bloodsuckers. Now, let's talk about how clothing was also key in this fight. Who said medieval fashion was uncomfortable? It was all about survival. Let's take a look at how peasants dressed back then. Picture a peasant in a long-sleeve shirt and baggy pants. Sure, they might not win best dressed, but that outfit had a purpose: to protect against mosquito bites. Long sleeves weren't a fashion choice, they were a barrier. And let's not forget about light colors. Instead of rocking a dark and mysterious look, peasants chose beige or white. And you know why? Because mosquitoes are drawn to dark colors. So if you wanted to avoid becoming an all-you-can-eat buffet, dressing like you were heading to a picnic in the countryside was the smart move. If you think about it, it's not so different from modern fashion. These days, we wear light-colored, breathable clothes in summer to beat the heat. And, as a bonus, keep bugs away. It's like medieval peasants were the original influencers of mosquito protection. And while medieval outfits might seem odd to us now, for them, it was essential. They weren't worried about how their look would perform on Instagram. They cared about whether they could work without getting covered in bites. So next time you see a long-sleeve shirt in the store, remember, it's not just a style, it's a strategy. We've seen how plants helped and how clothing was another line of defense. Now, let's talk about how time and schedule also played a role. Peasants didn't just work hard, they were strategic geniuses. Let's talk about how they adjusted their schedules and activities to avoid those times when mosquitoes were throwing their own little parties. First, it's important to know that mosquitoes are most active during dawn and dusk. So, what did our peasant friends do back then? Instead of heading out to work at those times, they made the most of the daylight hours when the mosquitoes were more asleep than on a lazy Sunday morning. They tackled their heaviest tasks when the sun was at its peak. Basically, it was like following an office schedule. But instead of coffee, they had to deal with a swarm of bugs. And yes, if that sounds pretty sensible, it's because it was. It's like when you plan your outdoor activities during summer. If you want to enjoy a picnic, you wouldn't plan it for 5 p.m., right when the sun starts to dip and mosquitoes go into full attack mode. Instead, you'd wait until the temperature cools down a bit later. That's practical wisdom in action. Even parties and celebrations had strategy behind them. It wasn't unusual to hold them at times when mosquitoes weren't a problem. Just imagine a party at 6 in the evening, and suddenly you realize all the guests are getting eaten alive. No, thank you. So they made sure the fun started a bit later, once the mosquito threat had passed. So we've seen how clothing and plants helped, but activity planning was a key part of the defense too. Peasants were true masters of avoiding bites, and their clever planning leaves us with a valuable lesson. Sometimes the best defense is simply knowing when and how to act. And finally, let's see how their popular wisdom helped them coexist with mosquitoes. Let's dive in. Without internet or books, these peasants developed their own defense system. How did they do it? Pure observation and experience. Just like you realize you can't eat pizza every day. Well, not without consequences. These peasants spent hours outdoors watching how mosquitoes behaved. They noticed that certain spots were more likely to be mosquito hotspots. For example, if there were puddles or damp areas, that's where the mosquito party was. They adapted by changing where they planted their crops, or even by choosing different times to work in the fields. And they passed all this knowledge down by word of mouth. A grandpa would tell his grandson, "Look, if you see the mosquitoes going wild, it's best to head home before you become their buffet." And just like that, this wisdom was passed down from generation to generation. Knowledge that, although not written in books, was just as valuable as any scientific manual. These days, modern science also relies on observation. Scientists study mosquito behavior, but they often forget there's a lot to learn from folk wisdom. Sometimes the simplest thing is the most effective. It's like when your friend tells you the trick to not getting pricked by a needle is to look away. It might sound silly, but hey, it sometimes works. So, the next time you hear one of those old-timey grandma tips, think twice. There might be more truth in it than you think. Now, let's recap everything we've learned about medieval life and mosquitoes. Here we go. So, there you have it. Medieval peasants had a full-blown arsenal against mosquitoes. From managing damp zones to growing mosquito-repelling plants, they didn't let those little flying vampires get the best of them. We've seen how they organized and defended themselves against these insects, proving they didn't need expensive sprays or high-tech gadgets to keep mosquitoes at bay. So, what can we learn from them today? Well, the secret lies in simplicity and using what you've got around you. It's like the peasants were the original eco-warriors, making the most of their environment to survive. In a world where everything seems so complicated, sometimes going back to basics might just be the smartest move. Sure, we're not about to go out and build a mosquito trap out of straw and mud, but we can be inspired by their creativity. So, thinking about their cleverness, what strategy would you try? Maybe planting a little herb garden in your backyard. Come on, don't say you don't have time. If peasants could do it between harvests and taking care of animals, you can definitely do it between Netflix episodes. Before you go, I just want to thank you for joining me on this journey to the Middle Ages. Remember, while life has changed a lot since then, some lessons never go out of style. Until next time, may the mosquitoes leave you in peace. Thanks for coming along on this trip to the past.